First contact gone wrong. Dr. James Chen watched through the viewport as the mysterious planet Kepler 742 bits grew larger, its swirling atmosphere a mesmerizing dance of emerald and gold. After 3 years of interstellar travel, the research vessel Horizon had finally reached its destination. The exoplanet had captured the attention of Earth's scientific community when long-range scans detected unusual energy signatures suggesting advanced civilization, despite being well outside the traditional Goldilocks zone. Final approach vector calculated, announced the ship's AI. Warning: detecting unusual magnetic fluctuations in the upper atmosphere. James frowned at the holographic readouts floating before him. As the mission's lead xenophysicist, anything unusual about the planet's physical properties fell under his purview. Can you elaborate on the nature of these fluctuations, ARI? The magnetic field appears to possess quantum-level properties I cannot fully analyze. It seems to be artificially generated, Dr. Chen. Before James could respond, the ship shuddered violently. Warning alerts blazed across every screen as the Horizon's engines suddenly cut out. The planet's strange magnetic field had transformed into a massive gravitational net, drawing them inexorably toward the surface. Emergency landing protocols engaged, Araya announced, her usual calm voice carrying an edge of concern. All crew, brace for impact. James gripped his console as the ship plummeted through the atmosphere, its hull groaning under the strain. The Horizon had been designed for controlled landings, not this barely controlled descent. Through the viewport, he caught glimpses of vast crystalline cities spreading across the landscape below, confirming their suspicions of advanced civilization. The impact, when it came, was surprisingly gentle. The ship's emergency systems had managed to slow their descent enough to prevent catastrophic damage, though James could hear the ominous creaking of stressed metal throughout the hull. Hull integrity at 82%, Araya reported. Life support systems functional. External atmosphere is breathable, though I detect high levels of an unknown element. James ran a quick system diagnostic. Can we take off again? Negative. The magnetic field appears to have completely neutralized our drive systems. We are, effectively, grounded. Before James could process this disturbing information, the ship's external sensors detected movement. Through the viewport, he watched as several sleek vessels descended from the sky, surrounding the Horizon in a precise formation. Their design was organic, almost artistic, yet clearly built for power. We're being hailed, Araya announced. Put it through. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the striking figure. The alien was remarkably humanoid, tall and athletic, with iridescent skin that shifted between purple and gold. Most surprisingly, they appeared female, at least by human standards. Welcome to Artemisia. The alien spoke in perfect English, causing James to start in surprise. I am High Commander Lyra. You have entered restricted space and will be detained for processing. Do not attempt to resist. James raised his hands in a universal gesture of peace. I'm Dr. James Chen of the Earth research vessel Horizon. We mean no harm. Our mission is purely scientific. The High Commander's expression remained impassive. Male crewed vessels are forbidden in Artemisian space. You will be taken into custody and evaluated according to our laws. Male crewed? I don't understand. We had no knowledge of any restrictions. Our scans showed signs of advanced civilization, but we received no warning broadcasts or... The law is absolute, Lyra interrupted. Prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will be met with lethal force. As armed guards transported James from his ship, he began to notice something odd. Every single Artemisian he saw appeared female. The guards, the technicians examining his ship, the officials conferring in corners, all of them displayed feminine characteristics. They led him to a vast crystalline structure that seemed to grow from the ground itself. Inside, the architecture was a stunning blend of organic shapes and advanced technology. Under different circumstances, James would have been fascinated by the engineering implications. In a sterile examination room, several Artemisian scientists subjected him to a battery of tests. They spoke among themselves in their native language, which sounded like crystalline wind chimes, but addressed him in English when necessary. Their technology was unlike anything he'd seen, utilizing principles that seemed to defy conventional physics. Finally, High Commander Lyra returned, accompanied by what appeared to be a senior scientist. "The examination is complete," Lyra announced. "Dr. Chen, you are now aware of your situation." The scientist, who introduced herself as Director Vennek, explained, "Your male physiology has already been altered by our planet's defensive field. The quantum magnetic barrier that disabled your ship also creates specific biological changes in male organisms. To be direct, you cannot leave Artemisia. Any attempt to pass through the barrier would result in immediate cellular dissolution." James felt the blood drain from his face. "That's impossible. The magnetic field is far beyond your current scientific understanding," Venna interrupted. "It was created by our ancestors to protect our society from particular threats. While we have evolved beyond those original concerns, the field remains necessary for our civilization's stability." "You're saying I'm trapped here permanently?" Lyra's expression softened slightly. "You will be assigned quarters and given a position appropriate to your skills. You may even find that Artemisia offers opportunities your own world cannot. But yes, you are now permanently bound to this planet." As James was led to his new quarters, his mind raced with questions. How many others had been trapped here? Why maintain such an elaborate trap for male visitors? And most importantly, was there really no way to escape? Through the window of his assigned room, he watched the twin suns of Artemisia set, casting the crystalline city in shades of amber and rose. Somewhere out there, he knew, his ship held the key to understanding this strange world's technology. He just had to figure out how to access it without arousing suspicion. "Welcome home." Aria's familiar voice suddenly spoke from a wall panel, making him jump. "They've integrated me into their local network. I have access to considerable data now, though much remains restricted." James smiled for the first time since landing. Perhaps he wasn't as alone as they thought. "Tell me everything you've learned about this place," he whispered. Every detail could be important. As Aria began her report, James settled in for a long night of planning. He might be trapped for now, but he was still a scientist. And if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was finding solutions to impossible problems. The first son of Artemisia would rise on a very different man than the one who had crashed here. Whether his captors realized it or not, they had just initiated a chain of events that would shake their society to its foundations. The rules of survival. The morning light filtering through the crystalline walls of James's quarters cast rainbow patterns across his workspace. After 2 weeks on Artemisia, he had transformed the Spartan room into a makeshift laboratory, his walls covered with holographic displays showing complex quantum calculations. The Artemisians had granted him access to their scientific databases, perhaps assuming he couldn't fully comprehend their advanced technology. They had underestimated human determination. Another anomaly detected in the barrier's frequency, Aria reported through his private comm unit. The pattern matches yesterday's fluctuation. James nodded, adding the data to his growing model of the planet's magnetic field. They're maintaining it artificially. Something this complex requires constant adjustment. A chime announced a visitor. James quickly collapsed his holographic displays as Director Venna entered, her iridescent skin shimming in the morning light. She carried herself with the precise grace that seemed common to all Artemisians, but her eyes held genuine scientific curiosity. "I trust you're settling into your new role, Dr. Chen," she asked, examining his quarters. "The Research Council was impressed by your insights into quantum mechanics, despite your limited background." James caught the subtle condescension in her tone, but maintained a pleasant expression. "Your civilization's understanding of quantum fields is remarkable. I'm honored to study under your guidance." "Indeed," Venna activated a holographic display of her own, which is why you've been granted increased access to our facilities. Your perspective may prove valuable in solving certain inefficiencies in our systems. As they walked through the sprawling research complex, James noticed things his initial shock had caused him to miss. Despite their advanced technology, the Artemisians seemed overly reliant on maintaining existing systems rather than innovating new ones. Their society hummed with power, but it felt somehow static, like a perfect machine that hadn't evolved in centuries. In the main laboratory, James was introduced to other researchers, all female, all brilliant, and all subtly frustrated by problems they couldn't quite solve. The quantum barrier protecting their world required enormous energy and constant maintenance. Yet whenever he asked about its origin or purpose, he received the same rehearsed answers about ancestral wisdom and societal necessity. During his lunch break, James ventured into one of the public gardens that dotted the research complex. These spaces were meant for relaxation, but he had noticed they also served as informal meeting places where information flowed more freely than in the monitored laboratories. "First time I've seen another human here," a voice spoke from behind him. James turned to find a tall, dark-skinned man tending to some exotic plants. Nathan Wells, formerly of the mining vessel Prospector, crashed here about 3 years ago. James felt a surge of excitement he carefully kept from his face. Dr. James Chen. 2 weeks in. Ah, still in the denial phase then. Nathan's smile held a hint of bitterness. "Let me guess, you're looking for a way to defeat the barrier, aren't you?" Nathan glanced around before lowering his voice. "Word of advice. Be careful who you trust here. The Artemisians aren't as united as they appear. Some believe the barrier is essential for their survival. Others." He trailed off as a group of guards passed nearby. Over the next few hours, Nathan carefully introduced James to others. A Centaurian physicist, trapped for 15 years, a Proximan engineer who had given up hope of escape, even a few sympathetic Artemisian scientists who questioned their society's isolation, but feared speaking openly. "We're not prisoners in the traditional sense," Nathan explained as they walked. "They give us work, homes, even some freedom. But make no mistake, we're specimens in a very comfortable zoo." They study how different species adapt to captivity. James processed this information carefully. The barrier affects all male organisms specifically. Why? That's the million-credit question, isn't it? The official story says it's protection against ancient enemies, but some of us think it's more complicated. The Artemisians reproduce through advanced genetic engineering. They haven't needed males of their own species for generations, but they keep collecting specimens from across the galaxy. Before James could respond, an alert sounded throughout the complex. Through the transparent walls, they watched as another ship was caught in the barrier's grasp, descending helplessly to the surface. "Right on schedule," Nathan muttered. They detect approaching ships long before they reach the barrier. Could warn them away, but they don't. Every few months, like clockwork, another ship accidentally crashes. James watched the ship land, his mind racing. The Artemisians' technology was incredibly advanced, yet somehow frozen in patterns established ages ago. They trapped male specimens from across the galaxy, but seemed more interested in observing than truly studying them. And that barrier, quantum technology far beyond anything he'd encountered, maintained with obsessive precision. "The barrier requires constant adjustment," he mused aloud. "What if that's not a bug, but a feature? What if it's meant to be unstable?" Nathan raised an eyebrow. "Meaning?" "Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic," James quoted. "But it's still technology, operating on scientific principles. The Artemisians maintain the barrier, but I'm beginning to think they don't fully understand how it works. They're following instructions left by their ancestors, but the original purpose." He was interrupted by another alert, this one accompanied by a subtle tremor that ran through the crystalline structures around them. In the distance, a section of the city's power grid flickered briefly. "Power fluctuations are increasing," Nathan noted. been happening more frequently lately. The maintenance crews seemed worried. James watched the crews rushing to stabilize the grid, a theory forming in his mind. The barrier wasn't just a trap. It was part of something larger, something the Artemisians themselves might have forgotten. But if he was right, proving it would be incredibly dangerous. "I need access to the historical archives," he told Nathan. "The real ones, not the sanitized versions they show visitors." Nathan's expression grew serious. "That's restricted to the highest levels of their government. Even suggesting we want access would raise suspicions. Then we'll have to be creative." James smiled, thinking of ARIA's growing access to the Artemisian network. Humans are good at that. As they walked back to their assigned quarters, James noticed more signs of strain in the seemingly perfect society around them. Maintenance crews worked constantly to keep systems running. Guards watched the growing population of alien males with increasing unease, and in the sky above, that mysterious barrier flickered with growing instability, like a cosmic mystery begging to be solved. "Get me everything you can about the power grid fluctuations," he sub-vocalized to ARIA, "and keep monitoring that barrier. If I'm right, we're not just looking for a way to escape. We're racing against time to prevent a catastrophe none of us fully understand." In his quarters that night, James reviewed everything he'd learned. The Artemisians had built their society on technology they no longer fully understood, maintaining systems whose true purpose had been lost to time. It was an elegant trap, but like all traps, it had to have a weakness. And if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was finding creative solutions to impossible problems. Tomorrow, he would begin testing his theories. But tonight, he allowed himself to feel something he hadn't since his crash landing. Hope. Because for the first time, he wasn't just looking for a way off this planet. He was unraveling a mystery that could change the fate of multiple civilizations. The real question was, would the Artemisians thank him for it, or try to stop him? Underground resistance. The maintenance tunnels beneath Artemisia's crystal cities were a stark contrast to the pristine structures above. Here, ancient technology pulsed with raw energy, and the walls themselves seemed to hum with forgotten power. James followed Nathan through the labyrinth, their path illuminated by bioluminescent strips that lined the ceiling. "The Artemisians rarely come down here," Nathan explained, his voice barely above a whisper. "Too much radiation from the old systems. Doesn't affect most other species the same way, though. Convenient, isn't it?" They reached a junction where the crystalline walls gave way to metal of an entirely different composition. Here, Nathan pressed his hand against what appeared to be a solid wall. A hidden door slid open, revealing a vast chamber that took James's breath away. The space was filled with alien technology from dozens of different civilizations. Holographic displays showed star charts and complex calculations. In corners and on makeshift workbenches, various species worked on equipment James couldn't begin to identify. It was like walking into a secret United Nations of the galaxy's trapped males. "Welcome to the Resistance," Nathan said with a hint of pride. "Though we prefer to call ourselves the Archive. Every crashed ship, every trapped scientist and engineer. We salvage what we can, learn what we can, and keep looking for answers." A tall, ethereal being with translucent skin approached them. "You must be Dr. Chen," it said in a melodious voice. "I am Kevin, formerly of the Proxima Scientific Academy. Nathan tells me you've made some interesting observations about the barrier." James noticed that Kevin's form seemed to shift and flow, making it difficult to focus on any one feature. "The quantum field isn't just unstable," he explained. "It's designed to be unstable. My AI assistant has been analyzing the power fluctuations. They follow a pattern, like a code or a message trying to break through." Fascinating. Kevin led them to a central holographic display. "We've been studying similar anomalies. Look at this." The display showed centuries of power grid data, collected painstakingly by generations of trapped visitors. The pattern of fluctuations was subtle but unmistakable, growing stronger and more frequent with each passing year. It's building toward something, a gravelly voice added. A reptilian being emerged from the shadows, its scales reflecting the holographic light. I am Sixth Temporal Mechanics Specialist. The barrier is not just spatial. It exists partially outside normal time. That's why our attempts to disable it have failed. James's mind raced with implications. The Artemisians' ancestors, they weren't just building a defense system, were they? This is all connected to something bigger. Now you're asking the right questions, Nathan said. Show him the archives, Kavan. The holographic display shifted, showing ancient Artemisian text that ARIA began translating through James's comm unit. The fragments told a disturbing story. Centuries ago, the Artemisians had faced a threat so terrible they had to remake their entire civilization to survive it. The barrier wasn't meant to keep males out. It was meant to keep something else away. But somewhere along the way, they forgot the truth, Kivan explained, or chose to forget. The current Artemisians maintain the systems without understanding their true purpose. They believe the collection of male specimens is about preserving genetic diversity, but that's just a convenient fiction. The barrier requires male energy signatures to function, Tusk added. That's why they keep gathering us. We're not specimens. We're batteries. James felt a chill run down his spine, and the increasing power fluctuations. Something's coming, Nathan said grimly. Whatever their ancestors were trying to keep out, it's found them. The barrier is failing not because it's breaking down, but because it's trying to warn us. A sudden tremor ran through the chamber, stronger than any before. Emergency lights flashed throughout the tunnels. That's the third major fluctuation this week, Kavan noted. They're growing exponentially. According to our calculations, we have perhaps 2 months before total barrier failure. The Artemisian leadership knows something's wrong, Nathan added. They've increased security, accelerated their collection of new specimens, but they're trying to solve the problem the wrong way. Adding more power to a failing system will only make the collapse more catastrophic. James studied the data scrolling across multiple displays. ARIA, cross-reference this with our quantum field analysis. Look for any correlation with the original barrier specifications. After a moment, ARIA's voice came through his comm. Pattern match found. The barrier's quantum signature is shifting to match an external frequency. Origin unknown, but the signal appears to be coming from deep space. It's like a quantum lighthouse, James mused. Not keeping something out, but waiting for something to return. The question is, were the ancestors trying to prevent that return, or prepare for it? Another tremor shook the chamber, causing several pieces of equipment to crash to the floor. In the distance, alarm sirens began to wail. We're running out of time to find out, Nathan said. The Artemisian solution will be to capture more ships, add more power. They'll make things worse. Then we need to make them understand, James decided. Not just the leadership, all of them. This isn't about escape anymore. Whatever's coming, it threatens everyone on this planet. They'll never listen, Sixth warned. Centuries of tradition and fear are not easily overcome. Then we'll show them proof they can't ignore. James turned to the assembled beings. Each of you represents the best scientific minds of your civilizations. Together, we have knowledge the Artemisians have never considered. We don't need to break the barrier. We need to decode what it's trying to tell us. Kivan's form rippled with what might have been approval. What do you propose? James smiled. First, we need to access the original barrier controls. Not the maintenance systems the Artemisians use, but the core programming. ARIA has found references to a central control facility, hidden somewhere in these tunnels. Once we understand the true nature of the barrier, we can prove to the Artemisians that their entire understanding of their history is wrong. And if they try to stop us, Nathan asked, then we'll have to trust that the survival instinct is stronger than cultural inertia, because if we're right about what's coming, James let the thought hang unfinished. The chamber fell silent except for the distant hum of ancient machinery. Around them, the collected knowledge and technology of a dozen civilizations waited to be unified into something new. It was exactly the kind of impossible problem humans were best at solving, not through superior technology or strength, but through collaboration and creative thinking. "We have 2 months," James announced to the gathered beings. "Let's make them count." As they began planning, none of them noticed the small maintenance drone hovering in a dark corner of the chamber, its sensors recording everything. In her private chambers, Director Venna watched the feed with growing concern. The human was far more clever than they had anticipated. Perhaps it was time to accelerate their plans. The game was about to change, and not everyone would survive the coming revelation. Breaking point. The ancient control room hummed with power as James and his allies worked frantically to decode the barrier's original programming. They had found the facility buried deep beneath the city's foundations, its existence forgotten by all but the oldest maintenance protocols. For 3 days straight, they had worked in shifts, racing against time as the barrier's fluctuations grew more violent above them. Another ship detected approaching the planet. HFY announced through the facility's newly restored communication system. Artemisian defense forces are mobilizing to secure the crash site. James looked up from his workstation, dark circles under his eyes. "How many does that make this week?" 7, Nathan answered grimly. "They're getting desperate. The power grid can barely handle the current load." Kivan's translucent form shifted anxiously as they monitored the quantum readings. The barrier's resonance frequency is approaching critical levels. If they add power from another captured vessel. A massive tremor rocked the facility, stronger than any before. Emergency lights flashed as ancient safety systems screamed warnings in a dozen dead languages. "Status report," James called out. Skith's claws flew across his console. "The new ship, it's different. Energy signature suggests it's a Earth vessel, but the technology, it's far more advanced than anything we've seen." James felt his heart skip a beat. "Show me." The main display flickered to life, showing a massive vessel caught in the barrier's grip. Its design was unmistakably human, but incorporated elements of technology that shouldn't exist yet. As he watched, the ship's hull began to glow with an odd resonance. "That's impossible," Nathan breathed. "Those are quantum dampeners. Earth doesn't have that technology." "Not yet," James corrected, his mind racing. "But we will. Think about it. The barrier exists partially outside normal time. What if this ship is from our future?" Before anyone could respond, Director Venna's voice echoed through the facility. "Attention unauthorized personnel. You have accessed restricted systems and will be detained. Security forces are en route. Do not attempt to resist." "They found us," Nathan cursed. "The maintenance drone. I should have known they'd be watching." James made a quick decision. "Area. Execute Protocol Omega. Authorization. Chen 79 Delta." "Acknowledged," the AI responded. "Uploading compiled data to all available networks." "What are you doing?" Kivan demanded. "Showing everyone the truth." James turned to his allies. For centuries, the Artemisians have maintained this barrier without understanding its true purpose. Now every screen, every holographic display in the city is about to show them what we've discovered. The facility's doors began to seal as security forces approached. On the main display, the mysterious Earth ship had begun to pulse with an energy signature that matched the barrier's frequency perfectly. "It's not just from our future," James explained rapidly. "It's here to warn us. The barrier isn't failing, it's responding to a signal. A signal that's been traveling through space for centuries, getting stronger." The display shifted to show deep space readings. Something massive was approaching Artemisia, its quantum signature a perfect match for the barrier's resonance. "They're coming back," Skith whispered. "The ones the Artemisians were really hiding from." Security forces began cutting through the facility's doors as James accessed the original barrier controls. The ancient interface responded to his commands, revealing a truth that had been hidden for generations. The Artemisians didn't build the barrier, he announced as the doors began to give way. They found it. Their ancestors discovered this technology and learned just enough to maintain it. But its true purpose. The doors burst open as High Commander Lyra led a squad of heavily armed guards into the facility. "Step away from the controls," she ordered. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." "No, you don't," James countered, standing his ground. "Your ancestors weren't trying to trap males from other species. They were gathering warriors, preparing for something they knew would return. The barrier doesn't just keep things out. It's been collecting defenders." Another violent tremor shook the facility. Above them, the mysterious Earth ship had begun broadcasting a message on all frequencies. As the translation appeared on their screens, both security forces and resistance members froze in shock. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force vessel Prometheus. Temporal date 2157. Do not attempt to destroy the barrier. It's humanity's last defense against the Void Collective. We followed them back through time, trying to prevent what happens in our future. The barrier must be completed. All species must stand together, or everything ends." James felt a chill run down his spine as he looked at the captain's name. In some future that hadn't happened yet, his daughter would command that ship. "The barrier was never meant to divide us," he told the stunned Artemisians. "It was meant to unite us. Your ancestors knew that survival would require the combined strength of many species. That's why they created this society, why they gathered males from across the galaxy. Not as specimens or power sources, but as part of an army they knew would be needed." High Commander Lyra lowered her weapon slowly, her expression troubled. "If what you're saying is true..." Another tremor, stronger than ever, interrupted her. The main display showed the barrier's energy pattern shifting, responding to something vast approaching from deep space. "We don't have time for doubt," James urged. "The barrier is failing because it was designed to do so once the threat returned. Either we work together now, all of us, every species trapped here, or everything your ancestors worked for will be lost." Lyra and Venna exchanged looks as the facility's sensors registered multiple massive objects entering the star system. "The Void Collective," Kivan whispered, just as the legends warned. James turned to the assembled beings, humans, Artemisians, and a dozen other species. "Your ancestors left us the tools we need, but they couldn't give us the solution. That's something we have to create together. Each of our species has unique knowledge, unique capabilities. Apart, we're trapped. Together, we might survive." Lyra finished. She straightened, every inch the commander. "What do you need?" James smiled grimly as he pulled up the barrier's original specifications. "First, we need to understand what your ancestors actually built. Because this isn't just a barrier, it's a weapon. And we have very little time to learn how to use it." Above them, the future Earth ship took up a defensive position as more objects emerged from deep space. The real battle was about to begin, and the fate of multiple civilizations would depend on their ability to work together. The question was, had they discovered the truth in time? Liberation. The crystalline spires of Artemisia's capital city pulsed with energy as the combined forces of a dozen species worked to reactivate the ancient defense systems. In the converted control facility deep underground, James watched as holographic displays tracked the approaching Void Collective ships, massive, dark structures that seemed to absorb both light and space itself. "Quantum resonance at 90%, Araya announced. "The barrier is accepting input from all species now." Around the central control hub, representatives from every trapped civilization worked at stations originally designed for the Artemisians' ancestors. Kivan's natural ability to perceive quantum states made them invaluable in monitoring the barrier's frequency. Sixth's understanding of temporal mechanics helped synchronize the defense grid with the future Earth ship systems. Even the Artemisians, led by Director Venna, had thrown themselves into understanding the true nature of their inherited technology. Message from the Prometheus, Nathan called out. They're detecting temporal distortions around the void ships. Whatever these things are, they're not just traveling through space. They're trying to exist in multiple time streams simultaneously, James theorized. That's why the barrier had to operate outside normal time. Your ancestors, he nodded to Lyra. They weren't just building a defense system. They were creating a temporal anchor point. Another tremor shook the facility as the first Void Collective ships entered weapon range. On the main display, the Prometheus engaged its advanced weapons, but the energy beams seemed to pass harmlessly through the dark vessels. Conventional weapons are useless. Captain Sarah Chen's voice crackled through the comm. In our timeline, we learned that too late. The barrier is the key. It was designed to force them into a single temporal state. James studied the ancient controls with new understanding. The male energy signatures, that's what they were afraid of. Something about our quantum resonance disrupts their ability to shift through time, which is why they tried to eliminate all male species in our future, Sarah confirmed. But the Artemisians found a way to use that weakness against them. We followed them back through time to ensure that defense would be ready. High Commander Lyra stepped forward, her expression resolute. Then let us finish what our ancestors began. All defense stations, prepare to channel power to the barrier. The assembled species took their positions as James initiated the final sequence. The barrier's quantum field began to pulse in a new pattern, its energy reaching out to encompass the approaching void ships. Multiple temporal signatures detected, Kivan reported. They're trying to shift away. Not this time, James muttered. Araya, execute the resonance pattern. Everyone, channel your energy through your stations. The barrier doesn't just need power, it needs our combined quantum signatures. The facility hummed with energy as every being present focused their unique biological signatures through the ancient technology. Above them, the barrier began to change, its usual purple-gold color shifting through spectrums only Kivan could fully perceive. By the first light, Kivan gasped. The patterns, they're like nothing I've ever seen. The void ships, caught in the barrier's expanding field, began to distort. Their dark surfaces rippled as they were forced into a single temporal state. On the main display, readings showed their temporal signatures collapsing. It's working. Sarah's voice held triumph. Their temporal shields are failing. All ships, concentrate fire on the designated coordinates. The Prometheus led the attack, its weapons finally finding purchase on the now vulnerable void ships. But as the first enemy vessel exploded, a massive energy surge rocked the barrier. Quantum cascade forming, Skth warned. The barrier can't contain the temporal backlash. It was never meant to, James realized, studying the original designs. Your ancestors didn't just build a weapon, they built a trap. The barrier isn't just forcing them into our time stream. It's pulling them into a temporal void, a prison outside of time itself, Sarah confirmed. But the power requirements. Another surge rocked the facility as more void ships were drawn into the forming temporal void. Warning signals blared from every station. The system's overloading, Nathan shouted over the noise. We need more power. No, James countered, his mind racing. We need less. The barrier isn't failing, it's transforming. Everyone, reduce power to minimum levels. Let it collapse inward. That's insane. Lyra protested. The barrier is the only thing protecting us. Trust him. Sarah's voice held absolute certainty. In every timeline where we fought them directly, we lost. The only victory we ever found was here, in this moment, doing something they could never understand, letting go. One by one, the stations powered down. The barrier's energy field began to contract, drawing the void ships into an ever-tightening spiral of temporal energy. Their attempts to shift through time only accelerated the process, each temporal jump pulling them deeper into the trap. Temporal void reaching critical mass, Kivan reported. Collapse in 3, 2, 1. A flash of light brighter than 1,000 suns filled every screen. When it faded, the void ships were gone. In their place, a small, stable temporal anomaly hung in space, a prison outside of time itself. "Did we?" Nathan began. "Victory confirmed." Sarah's voice held both triumph and wonder. "The Void Collective is contained. All ships report temporal space returning to normal." A cheer went up from every species present. Centuries of preparation, generations of trapped civilizations, had led to this moment. The barrier that had been their prison had become the galaxy's salvation. In the days that followed, the changes came quickly. Without the need to maintain the barrier, the quantum field that had trapped male visitors began to dissipate naturally. Ships could come and go freely, carrying news of what had happened at Artemisia. The Artemisian society, faced with the truth of their history, began to transform. The rigid structures that had developed around maintaining the barrier gave way to a new era of cooperation and exchange between species. The underground archive became a center of multi-species scientific research, its combined knowledge helping to advance a dozen civilizations. 1 month after the battle, James stood in the garden where he had first met Nathan, watching ships from across the galaxy land freely on Artemisian soil. The Prometheus had returned to its own time, carrying with it the knowledge that would prevent the dark future its crew had fled. "Ready to leave?" Nathan asked, joining him. James smiled, watching as humans, Artemisians, and a dozen other species worked together to dismantle the last remnants of the old barrier technology. "Actually, I've been offered a position here. The archive is becoming a full-fledged research institution. They want me to help coordinate projects between species, breaking down barriers even after the big one's gone." Nathan chuckled. "Sounds like important work." "The most important," James agreed, "because that's what humans do best. We don't just solve problems. We bring people together to solve them, even if those people happen to be from different planets." Above them, the skies of Artemisia were clear and open for the first time in centuries. The prison that had brought them together was gone, but something far more valuable had taken its place. Understanding between species, cooperation across civilizations, and the knowledge that the greatest victories come not from power or technology, but from the willingness to work together. The quantum barrier was gone, but the real barriers, those of fear, isolation, and mistrust between species, had finally been broken. And in the end, that was the greatest liberation of all.